Go ahead, Ian.
Oh, it's my turn. Okay, great. All right, so we're going to start with an opening prayer. Take a moment to take a deep breath, center yourself. Almighty God, we thank you for the gift of your holy word. May it be a lantern to our feet, a light to our paths, and strength to our lives. Take us and use us to love and serve all people in the power of love and light. Amen. Okay, so do we do the daily word now or do I do the song now? All right, let's so I'll do a little hymn for you guys that we can all sing together. And this is one of my favorite gospel tunes. This one's called Down by the Riverside. Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Ain't gonna study war no more. 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 Gonna stick my sword in the golden sand down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna stick my sword in the golden sand down by the riverside. Ain't gonna study war no more. 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 Gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. All right, thank you very much. And now we can do our daily word.
Good morning. Today is Sunday, January 30th, 2022. Today's words, is world peace. I envision all people living in harmony. Sometimes I wonder about my place in the world that is changing so rapidly. I realize that many of the world's people may be wondering the same thing. Change can feel scary, especially when I feel as though I have to navigate a shifting landscape alone. I expand my awareness and wonder whether others are feeling the way I do. Feeling fearful or insecure can overwhelm feelings of peace. As peace seems further and further away, it's easy to drift into isolation and discord. I pray, reclaiming peace by feeling my divine identity as a child of God. I remember that all people share this divine identity. I include all the world's people in my prayer, envisioning us coming together in harmony to create a peaceful world. And from the Bible, pursue peace with everyone and the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. That's Hebrews chapter 12, verse 14. Today's words, world peace.
All right, Gloria, thank you for those wonderful words. And I'm going to do a quick special music tune for you guys. And this week I'm doing a little Motown for my first song here. And this one is the well-known song "Stand By Me." I also invite you guys to sing along with this one if you'd like. And this one I really like because the lyrics can be very spiritual if you look at them that way. And for me, the song is about standing with God through difficult times. When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light you'll see, no, I won't be afraid. I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. Whenever you're in trouble, won't you stand by me? Oh, won't you stand by me? Oh, stand now, stand by me. If the sky that we look upon should tumble and fall, and the mountains should tumble to the sea, no, I won't be afraid. I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. Whenever you're in trouble, won't you stand by me? Oh, won't you stand by me? Oh, stand now, stand by me, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, won't you stand by me? Oh, stand by, stand by me, stand by me, stand by me. All right, thank you guys very much. So I'm going to begin my talk today with a question for all of you. And that question is, what is your relationship to God? And I hope that most of you feel like you have a good or even a great relationship with God, or the very least are working on it. Now, the dictionary defines a relationship as the way in which two or more people are connected. And in our day-to-day lives, we have a lot of different relationships with people and things. And some of those relationships, like with friends or loved ones, can be very loving and intimate and connected. And others, like maybe the barista at the local coffee shop you go to, can be friendly, but maybe not have a very significant connection. And then while others, like maybe the guy on Facebook that's always posting Trump essays, are probably not so friendly, and maybe you even have some enemies in your life. But what all of these relationships have in common is that the status of the relationship usually has to do with how much work or effort the two people are putting into it, and also how they treat one another. So I'd like to invite you guys, take a quick moment and think about the current relationships that you might have in your life, whether that's your friends, that's your family members, and even enemies, if you have any of those. Where does your relationship to God fit into this? Do you feel like your relationship is as close as with some of your best friends or with even your partner? Hopefully you do feel this way. But if you're like me and you don't quite have that feeling, this talk will help you and maybe give you some ideas on how you can strengthen your connection to God. So, whether you feel you have a great connection with God or maybe that it needs a little bit of work, it all starts with being honest about what it takes to make a great relationship. Now, I think most people who have put some thought into the subject of what makes a great relationship will tell you that the most essential quality to a great relationship is great communication. In my own personal life, I have friends who live right down the road from me and even roommates in my own house that I don't necessarily have the strongest relationship with, even though I see them all the time. But I have a fantastic relationship with my best friend who lives all the way in California. And that's because I talk to him all the time. And we always have very in-depth and meaningful conversations. And when it comes to partners, it's the same. One of the main things I've learned in the few relationships I've been in is that usually the first sign of things declining is when the honesty or the frequency of the communication decreases between the two people. Now, of course, in my belief, it's the same with God. The only difference between God and these other relationships is that whereas your friend might not be talking to you all the time, you might get a message or an email every once in a while, or maybe you have a friend who calls you regularly, but God is talking to us all the time. And it's often the case that even though he's speaking to us, we're not always listening. So I feel like there are kind of like two ways that God usually can speak to us that are easily understood. And I think the first is when we receive signs or symbols in our day-to-day life. Now, these messages from God can be sometimes easy to miss or easy to overlook. But I think the important thing here is that when we feel like we are receiving a message from God or communication from God, one of my main points in this talk is that I think it's important for us to respond in some way. Now, I think for everybody, this can be a little bit different. So sometimes a response could be as simple as just sitting in the moment. And, you see some sign. For example, the other day, I've been going through a little bit of a tough time recently in my relationship, and that's affected my mood. But the other day, I had like a really, really good day. And, I got up super early, was very productive. And I remember throughout the day, these good things just kept happening to me. I, heard from a friend I hadn't heard from in a while. I got an email of an opportunity that I'd been looking at for a while, and it said that you got the gig basically. And then at night, I had a band gig, and after the band gig, I ended up meeting these people in the audience, and I ended up becoming really close friends with them. And I remember at the end of the night being like, this is God encouraging me and basically giving me these positive signs that I'm doing the right thing, that I've got to stay strong, and I've got to just focus on being the best version of myself that I can. And I remember that normally I think I would have just kind of let these things go and be like, oh, this was just a lucky day. But because I had been preparing this talk, I kind of knew in that moment to take a moment, and I just thanked God. That's what I did. I took a moment and I was like, thank you. And I think that something as simple as that can be all that it takes. You don't have to say thank you. Sometimes you can just acknowledge it in your own head, or take a reverent moment of silence where you just take a moment to center yourself and try to connect. But I think the important thing is that we try to build a conversation with God, however that might look for us. Now, I mentioned the first way that God sends messages to us, which is through signs or symbols or just random happenings in our life that might be divinely inspired. Now, and that could be a whole topic in and of itself. But another way that God speaks to us could be in the form of words, inspirations, and sounds and images that can come up in our consciousness, sometimes very spontaneously. And some of us might experience this frequently, and some of us might not experience this that often. I know for me, the way that I kind of connect with that is when I hear beautiful music in my head. It's always, well, not always, but when it's music that is kind of that I've never heard before and music that is just very creative. This is how I write a lot of my music. I always have felt like that is, divine inspiration from God, basically from a greater source. So that can be one way. Sometimes it can be images, sometimes it can be feelings, sometimes it can be sensations, and sometimes it can be an actual voice in your head. I know that sometimes when I meditate and I go very, very deep, I can get messages, like a literal voice in my head that speaks to me sometimes. This is, it can be kind of rare, but I imagine that there are some people where they're very connected, and maybe some of you are this way, and they experience those things all the time. Now, if you're someone who doesn't experience this very often, or maybe not at all, or someone who would like to experience more, like myself, because I would like to experience more and have more of this conversation and communication from God. So I fully believe that our brain is kind of like a radio, like one of those old radios where you can tune it to different frequencies. And there's a lot of different channels that our brain can switch to at any moment. I mean, obviously, when we're stressed out or we're anxious or whatever, our brain is tuned to the channel of stress, right? And that's the kind of frequency that we're in. And when we're in moments like that, the radio channel that is speaking to us through our brain is going to send us messages and basically interpret life and through a lens of that frequency. So if we want to get messages from God and communicate with God, we have to tune our brain to the frequency that that God speaks in. And if we don't do this very often, then we're not going to be able to hear his messages. So, of course, the frequency that God speaks in is the frequency we go to in meditation. When we silence our mind and we become very, very in the moment and attentive, and we allow our thoughts to kind of settle down or just observe them, and we're able to settle ourselves, it's like finding the silence opens up the space for that divine inspiration to happen. Now, when I normally meditate, most of the time that I meditate, I usually, which is the practice that I do most often to connect with my spirituality, most of the time in the past, I have mostly just focused it on mindfulness, which, as you all know, is paying attention to your breath, paying attention to your body, and using this as a way to become more mindful and generate that feeling in your life. And mindfulness is very important, but I think a lot of times when we meditate, at least this is very true for me, we meditate to get ourselves to a good mental place, and maybe we receive some divine inspiration. But I think it would be great if more often in meditative practices, we also include messaging God and responding to God, or reaching out to him as part of our practice, as a way to try and build our relationship to God, and to try and grow it, and maybe start a conversation with him that we do regularly. So one other thing that I think can help is to have a visualization of God that really resonates with you. And this might be something that's a little bit controversial, but we say that in unity there is only one ultimate power in the universe, and we call it God, and that its nature is absolute good and absolute love. But knowing that God is the universal and collective nature of goodness and love makes it very difficult to visualize that. I mean, that is such a wonderful concept, but it's also very vast and unknowable. And it's something you can almost see as like our human brains aren't really capable of imagining like really what that would look like. So we can think of the way that we use maps, right? I mean, we use maps of the world to see all of Earth on one page, which would be impossible even if we were up in space. And just as we use maps to visualize, we can use symbols to relate to God. Now, I think it's great that one of the things that I love about Unity is that it doesn't try to, it gives you this general sense of what God is, but it doesn't give you the specifics. And I think that's really important because I think for everybody, it can manifest differently. So, another Unity principle is that we are all divine beings in expression, and in unity, we call this the Christ presence. And if you think about it, what the Christ presence is just a symbol for something, right? Like it's, we use Jesus Christ as this representation for the human embodiment of divinity. And it's very useful to have that symbol that we can use to basically inspire us and to visualize and to reference when we need to think of what human divinity looks like in the real world. Now, this is a wonderful concept, and it's one of the most central things to unity. And what makes it so helpful is that, if we want to be expressions of divinity in our own lives, it's good to have a reference point. That's a very helpful thing. But when it comes to God, our reference point is this universal love and goodness that diffuses all things. And that's not as a very specific way to look at God. So something I would invite you all to consider is that to visualize God in your own way, if you'd like. Now, for some people, I think they prefer the mystery and the wonder of God, and maybe they like to not try to visualize God in any way. And I think that's wonderful, and I totally understand that. For me personally, when it comes to speaking to God and trying to build that relationship, I like the idea of visualizing it. So I know that, for example, and I think what's cool about this is that for each person, they can have their own interpretation of it, and whatever visualization you choose is your own. And also, it doesn't represent the truth of God. It's just your own personal reference. Just like the way that Jesus Christ, for unity, he doesn't represent the physical idea of divinity in us. He is the representation of it. He is the symbol for our divinity of God. So, what I like to use is just a ball of light. I think the sun is a very inspiring image, and I find myself very drawn to it. So I like to envision just this ball of light filled with love and goodness. And in my meditation practices, what I've started trying to do is to try to work that into my meditation practice and connect to it. And I'll give you an example. My mother, she sees God. Her vision of God is as la abuelita, or like the mother of all things. And so she visualizes it in her own practices as this very motherly figure who is kind of very connected to the earth and all of that. And I think that's wonderful too. I think what's it's almost fun but also very spiritual to do this practice. And you can use whatever you'd like, but the important thing is to try and start building that mental connection. So it's my belief that to build a strong connection with God, we only need about 5 minutes every day, which is why the title of my talk was 5-Minute Ritual. And I'm going to invite you guys to learn with me a 5-minute communion ritual, which is really just a combination of meditation and prayer but it's kind of well sequenced to get this practice going in your own life. So I've got an easy way to remember it, and it's 4 C's. So we have concentrate, create, communicate, and then center. So very, very convenient that it fit into this nicely memorable device. So really all this is we're combining different elements that we already know how to do. We're combining them into one very easy practice to try and start this conversation a little bit and build this connection. So let's start with concentrate. So concentrate refers to what we normally do in meditation. And as I mentioned earlier, the concentrate part is all about bringing our brain frequency, tuning that radio to the frequency where we're able to experience these messages. So how we start is to concentrate on our senses. Now, normally we start with the breath, and then we turn our attention to the body. And a lot of times we like to do a body scan. This is, a very common way to meditate. And that's a perfect way to do it. Now, I invite you to consider that there's lots of other ways to get into that meditative state. The point is just to concentrate on one of your senses. So you can focus on the smells in the room. Something I like to do sometimes is actually to just focus on my posture. And I will just sit there, and instead of focusing on the breath or focusing on how my toes feel, I will just focus on the feeling in my body of being in a good posture and being in a solid posture until I really am like in my body, feeling that posture and feeling the kind of the muscles supporting me and all that. There's lots of different things you can do. You can concentrate on your chakras, if you believe in chakras, and on your energetic center, if you like that. And you can, of course, another thing that I like to do is put on some music and just concentrate fully on just listening to the sounds of the music. So we're just concentrating on the sounds around us. That's all you need to do. What that does is it's going to bring the frequency of the brain down, away from the busyness of thoughts, the busyness of stress, and down into that area where we're able to experience divinity. That's the frequency of divinity. So once we've concentrated, and we've concentrated on either our breath or our body or whatever we do to get mindful, and once again, I leave this up to you guys to figure out what works for you, we're going to create. Now, creating is really, that's just my nice, C word to mean either praying or setting an intention. So the reason I use the word create is because the unity principle says we are co-creators with God, and we create our own reality through our thoughts and beliefs. And it continues, it says, because our minds are connected to the creative mind of God, we have the power to create our experiences by the activity of our thinking. Everything in the material world has its beginning in thought. And as we all know, thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. So this is our opportunity to create after we're in that space. And I think you can do this in so many different ways. I think a beautiful way to create is to say an intention in your mind. Say, I intend this, or I manifest this. You can also pray. You can ask God for something to happen. Or you don't even have to use words. You can just visualize something. There's a wonderful meditative practice where you imagine a wish that you would really, really want in your life. And then you go through the wish and visualize a scene where that wish has been achieved in your life. And there's no words in this. You just go through every part of that scene and build it out in minute detail. The people who are there, the place, the feeling that you have, the sounds, the noises, the smells, everything about it until it's this vibrant vision in your head. And this is another beautiful way to set an intention. create a wish for yourself and create a scene in your mind, and then live in that scene and manifest it with the power of your thought. So that's the second step, is create. Now, the third step, this is the one that I think is important to try and add to your practice if this isn't something that you already do. And the third step is to communicate. So this is your opportunity, if you'd like, to visualize God in some way. Or if you don't want to visualize God, you don't have to either. But at this moment is where you can do one of two things. You can either be totally still and just invite God to give you a message or send you a feeling or send you an intention or something, and just basically sit in the intention of, I am open to whatever divinity wants to tell me, and I invite messages from God. That's one option. Another option would be to talk to God in whatever way you'd like. And once again, I mean, you can have fun with this, but talk to him, tell him about your life. What I love to do is thank God. So what I've recently started to do, as I was writing this talk and I kind of did some research and I came up with this idea, what I've started doing is when I get to this step, I just say, God, thank you for loving me. And that's it. I'm just thanking God for loving me. I'm thanking him for his love. You could say, God, thank you for the love and the goodness in my life or in the world. It's such a small, simple thing that takes literally seconds, if that. But it's connecting us. It's inviting a conversation with the divine, and it's taking that step of saying, I'm going to build a relationship with God in my life, or I'm going to strengthen the relationship that I already have. So I think this is the part that sometimes we don't include as often as we might like to. I know certainly in my own practices, I've not done this as much as I wish I would. And I'm glad I wrote this talk, because now I'm reminded that, God is someone to pray to, but also it's not just a one-way street. It has to be us as well, communicating back and inviting that conversation and bringing it into our lives. So the last step, the last C, is center. Now, I love this word, center yourself, because it's not, let's jump to enlightenment and go to the top of the mountain and just live in nirvana throughout our daily lives and just live in this wonderful, like, ecstasy of divinity within us all the time. No, centering yourself means you are centered. You are in the middle of something, in the middle of two things, really. And so the way I like to see this is that when you're centering yourself, you're bringing yourself. So let's imagine we have a spectrum of consciousness. And on one end of the spectrum, we have, pure living in the moment, pure consciousness, pure divinity, whatever you'd like to say on this one side. And on the other side, we have our most hyperactive, anxious brain full of thoughts. Centering yourself, to me, in this context, means we're going from this meditative place and we're bringing ourselves back, but not all the way back to the real world, all the way back to our crazy thoughts and, thinking about this, thinking about that, but in the middle, balancing these two energies, the experience of the real world and the thoughts and all of the concepts that come along with, living in the reality that we do, and also balancing that feeling of divinity and that meditative feeling, that mindful feeling, whatever it is, coming back, but not all the way back, right? Not just ripping ourselves back into reality and everything's back. No, we're coming back to the center, not back to, the opposite of mindfulness. So those are our 4 C's, and I'm gonna repeat them for you guys. So first is concentrate, which is what we use to be mindful. Concentrating on anything, any one of the senses works. Then we're going to create, which is, as the unity principle says, co-create with God, creating our own reality through thoughts, through either praying, manifesting with intention, or visualizing. And there's lots of other ways to do this as well. Then we're going to communicate. This is our chance to visualize God if we choose to, invite God to speak to us, and say whatever we'd like. Gratefulness is a wonderful place to start, and that's where I'm at right now, is just saying, thank you, God. And then centering, where we bring ourselves back to the middle. Now, I've done this a couple times. It only takes 5 minutes. And so I invite you guys to try and do some form of this and make it your own as much as you can every day. And find a moment of the day where you can just sit for 5 minutes and try to build that relationship with God. And I think that if we do this every day, we'll build that connection. We'll strengthen that connection. And the divine inspiration and all of the wonderful love and goodness that is waiting for us will be ours. So we're going to go into meditation now. And of course, the meditation is going to be a little practice of what I just said. So we will start, of course, by singing Surely the Presence. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel the mighty power and the grace. There's a holy hush around us. I see glory in this place. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. So we're going to start with concentrating. I'm going to leave this one very, very open to you guys. For those of you who like to concentrate on your breath, take a deep breath in and just tell yourself, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out, until you can start to really be in that moment with your breath. If you'd prefer, you could do a body scan. Start with your toes and try, if you can, to notice every single toe, go one by one, and then slowly go up your body. If you don't like either of those, or maybe you do but you want something else, just focus on the music. The point here is just to focus your attention on your senses until you're in your body and your senses. Okay, now we're going to move on to our next step. We're going to create. Now, if you'd like, this is your opportunity to say a silent prayer to God, or you can join me on this visualization exercise, where first, you're going to just imagine a wish that you have, either for yourself or just for the world. And when you have that wish, I want you to imagine the scene of the wish being fulfilled. And when you imagine this scene, go one by one. Start with the place of the scene. Build that area out. What does the ground look like? What does the surroundings look like? Fill it with vibrant colors. And look at all the colors. Think to yourself, what are the colors I see in the scene? And then as you're imagining this wish that you want either for yourself or for others or for the world, think of what you smell, what scents might be happening. Think of what you might be hearing. if there's action and movement in the scene, there's probably sounds coming from that. And I want you to just live in that scene for a moment. We're going to do a little moment of silence. We're going to do a couple moments of silence here. So we're going to take a moment of silence and live in that scene and manifest it in your mind. Now that we have made that scene real in our thoughts, it has formed a seed in reality. And I promise you God was listening. So now's our opportunity to communicate with God. And this is where, if you'd like, if you have a visualization of God that you enjoy, as I said, mine is a great big ball of light, much like the sun, much like some impossibly large star out in the universe. You can take a moment to bring up that vision in your head, and then I'm gonna, in a moment, bring us to another moment of silence. And I just want you to speak to God or invite God to speak to you. And whatever happens, happens. For myself, I'm going to repeat what I did earlier, and I'm going to just say, God, thank you for loving me. And I think that's a beautiful thing to try. So if you don't have any inspirations of your own, you can just try that. So let's take another moment to make sure we're centered. Take another deep breath. We're going to take a moment of silence to communicate with God. Okay, you can bring your attention back to your body now, or to your senses, or to the music. And now it's time to center ourselves. Now, the important thing here is that we don't lose completely that feeling that we just had, whatever it was. That sense of calm or peace or inspiration. Bring your attention back to the room and the real world and open your eyes and look around. But try to stay in the middle if you can, in between those two states of mind. The busy mind, the one that exists in the real world, and the divine mind. Let's just do our best throughout the rest of the day to try and balance those two states. Exist somewhere where we can experience both. And you can sing with me as we do Hallelujah. 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 All right, thank you guys.
Wow, thank you so much. Took a lot of notes, smiled a lot, meditated with you. It's great to have you back with us. You're part of that great tribe, the Utes, and
Yes.
we get such wisdom from you. You think that you've heard it all or you've done it all. When we're in our 60s, 70s, 80s, For you, Leon, 30s, I know, okay. But uh, just there's so much in your message. I'm going to have to listen to this again and again. And I've been teaching meditation for years, and there's always something that just speaks to me. The idea of speaking to God is such an unknown concept because I think for me personally and others, it's like speaking is how we do it in a room like this. We'd love God to speak to us, but I think it would scare the heck out of us if the voice came into our head and started speaking to us as if we thought it was the Almighty. And I know that God speaks to us if I see something in like some of the posts that Gloria has been putting up, or some of the wisdom of Facebook, if you consider Facebook having wisdom. It's just that I'll see something about an animal or a dog being saved, and a tear will come into my eye, and that's God. That's God's tear, not mine. I had nothing to do with it. That's God speaking to me and through me. And there's and I've been fortunate to have a couple of messages in my lifetime. Only a couple, very few, but God speaks to us every day, and it's just being aware of that. It's just listening, just being, And I love the way you did this. Concentrate, create, communicate, and center. And some of us don't necessarily put it in that order.
Oh
But
yeah,
it was a
it's
great book.
totally yeah, and I think, it's just a framework. It's just a concept for everyone to make their own. And I really wanted the main kind of purpose of this talk to be, this is something to explore for yourself and make it your own. I don't want to give you a formula that is very specific, because I think for each of us, this can be totally different. I think there's probably some people who get actual messages from God and they have a voice in their head speaking to them and they feel very inspired by that. And other people just get little signs in their life every once in a while. So for everyone, it's different. So I think the practice of it is different too.
Yeah, Bill used to say he gets messages on the radio, and some people say they get messages and license plates, and you know, um,
Yeah.
messages are all
And
around us.
and I think the important thing is, I think a lot of us do feel that we get those messages in one way or another, but how often do we respond? And that's really where the inspiration for the talk came from, honestly.
Well, before everybody unmutes, I'd like you to just play some of your music, and then I'll do the prayer for love offerings and tithes, and then we'll open it up to the congregation. Is that all right?
Yeah, that sounds great. So, update on my music situation. So, I have most of my new album written and recorded, but right now, what I'm trying to figure out is how to put it online so that people can download it and basically donate whatever they want for the album. So, I mean, you can donate as little as $1 or as much as you feel the album is worth. The process of figuring out how to do that has taken a little bit longer than I expected, which is why it's not ready today. But I promise you, it's big on my priority list to try and get that active online somewhere. So it's really easy to just go and check out the music and all of that. So I'll definitely let you all know when I've finally figured out the necessary technological hurdles to get that going. But yeah, this next song I'm going to play is one I wrote for the album, and that's one I've never played before. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and put the camera down so you guys can see my fingers as I play. I think that'd be nice.
Wow. Wow, that's so beautiful.
Thank you guys very much.
Ian, I think that would work on 66.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's just, I look around the room here at everyone. We are a small group, but we are so blessed every week. Every week. We are so fortunate and lucky to have you, Ian, and all the wonderful speakers that support us and inspire us on a weekly basis. My God, we have so much to be thankful for, which leads us right to our prayer, love offerings and tithes. Divine love flowing through us blesses and multiplies all that we are, all that we have, all that we give, and all that we receive. Amen. And everybody just unmute your screens and share. You raise your hand and we'll call on you. We will call on you, meaning these three people here.
Hey, Grant, very enjoyable. I liked all of it. And what I'd like to get from you is those chord progression during the meditation. I know it's pretty simple. There's Marianne.
I'm here.
Hi.
Hi.
You owe me, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can give
He
that.
really wants Grant as a piano lesson.
No, I just want those. I want those chords.
Sure.
Thank
What do you mean chords? What do you mean chords?
I know what they were. So I usually kind of improvise, but I
Please
definitely remember what I
improvise.
used this time.
Yeah,
So,
they're pretty simple. I love them. All right, who's next?
Gloria. Hold on.
Ian, I thought it was a wonderful lesson today, and it's interesting that it never occurred to me to attach a visualization to God. I don't know why, but it never occurred to me. But since you brought it up, it's like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And my vision is a bluebird.
I love that. And I think the coolest part about it is that it's kind of fun. It's fun to do it, but it's very spiritual at the same time. So I think that's awesome.
And my bluebirds come to me every morning. So that's a nice reminder too.
Yeah, I think
Frequency.
that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Are the bluebirds there in the wintertime? Are
Oh,
you talking
yes.
about American bluebirds?
Oh, yes. The eastern bluebird is here at my heated water bowl. You must heat your water for them. And I get as many as 6 and 7 at my water bowl in the morning.
Wow, I put new water out almost every day for, so it won't be cold, but I don't have a heating system. I don't know how to get that. But anyway, I feed them in the wintertime only because you're not supposed to feed them in the summer when there's so much other abundance available to them, and they become dependent. And if you go on vacation, then they have no food. But I love the fact that you have eastern bluebirds. I don't think I have any here. I have lots of, the blue jays are back, and some people don't like blue jays as much, but I'm gloriously glad that they came back because they were gone for a long time. But they're back, but they don't bother other birds. They're not the aggressive ones that won't let other birds eat. So it's really wonderful. And there's a squirrel that joins in. They don't mind him either, or her. Thank you, Gloria.
Leon.
Well, Ian, usually the envy that I have for your talent and creativity usually overwhelms me. But today I want to thank you for your message. It was useful and practical and spiritual all in one. And I just thought it was terrific. So thanks a lot.
Very glad you enjoyed it.
Anyone else like to share? Yes.
Hello. Yes, thank you, Ian, for my new concepts on God, because just the word God I turn off. I mean, even though I use that when I'm talking about God to hear it, you know, it's it's just old stuff. You know, it needs a new coat of paint or whatever. But
I
yeah,
totally
I like.
agree, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And yeah, I'd like to know about your bird feeder warmer or your bird bath warmer, because I change the water every day too. Because I did look into a water bowl that I was going to put on the ground, a heated water bowl, but it said not to use an extension cord. And that's the only way I'm going to be able to get heat to anything, because the
Well,
cord in itself wasn't very long.
okay, well, I can tell you this. This is an infomercial. I got it on Amazon. It's a heated water bowl. It does have an outlet. I use an extension cord to connect it on my deck. It's attached to my deck railing, so I can see my birds when I'm sitting on my sofa. And in this cold weather, when it's like 17 degrees, you can see little steam coming up from the bowl, you know, that it's heated. You can also buy solar heated things to put in your thing, and there's different kinds.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, and Laura, I used to think that God was an acronym for guaranteed overnight delivery. Somebody else, please, quick. Jody?
Ian, I appreciate your guidance to communicate with God and be open to it. In my writing, I've been writing statements, questions to ask to God, and I use my character in my story to ask the question, and then I listen, because I don't know what the answer is going to be from whomever the question is posed. And I've been astounded at what I feel are the spiritual power of some of the answers that I'm getting, which not coming from me. And I would suggest that people open up to the question concept of asking God a question and then just listening.
Well, it sounds like, unlike me, you're someone who has already been practicing this, which I think is great. One of the reasons why I did this talk is because I felt like I wasn't doing much of that. So I think it's great that you're already kind of on that, on that train. It's great.
You're on your way.
Wonderful, yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's on their way.
Bob, also, I always blame how corny I can be, and everybody knows how corny I can be on God. It's not me. It's God, speaking through me. So God has a sense of humor. So it's His humor, not mine. It's not humor. It's humor. Anyone else? Jody?
Yeah, yeah. Well, everything you said was wonderful. Everything you said, bears additional thought on. The first thing that struck me was the image of the, as you call it, the old-timey radio, which you could tune in, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that image of that visualization of tuning something in, is going to be a good one for me. I really like that, to get to a certain frequency. I just like that. I like that image, that metaphor. And your song, the music you played at the end, the last thing you played, I could almost feel a story in it. It's like, like a light thing, and then it gets really powerful. And I can imagine a narrative in that when I was listening to it. And so it just, I won't go into what it is, but it was just very meaningful to me. And I never, like Gloria said, I never thought of visualizing God. I think because I came up with seeing pictures of God as, the guy with the beard and, sitting on a cloud in a big robe and all that. And I tried so hard to get away from visualizing that.
Right.
And with your ideas, it made me start to think, what is it that would give me that feeling. And it's, it was so easy after that because it's the sunrise,
There you go.
going to the beach particularly and sitting out there waiting for the sun to come up. And as it's coming up, you see the colors, you see the sun. And I said, there it is right there. Never.
That's
I
awesome.
was just so hard to get rid of that other one. I just never tried to replace it.
And that's what I love about this, for
Mhm.
Gloria, it's a bluebird, for you, it's a sunrise. And I think
Mhm.
that's what makes it wonderful, is that
Mhm.
unity leaves it so open to us to
Mhm.
choose
Mhm.
for ourselves how we want to visualize it.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I think that's great. It makes
Thank
me
you.
very happy that some of you have really, found that for yourselves. That's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank you. Oh.
Jody, I've always thought, and this is Ian for you, that you were a storyteller in your music. I always felt that.
Mhm.
Where your music goes, I mean, it's like the never-ending story, and I can't wait for the next chapter.
Well, it's funny you say that, because my goal in my 30s is to become a film composer. So
Oh,
after
yeah.
I'm playing a lot of band gigs, and I've got my own business and stuff, but that is my end goal, is to write
Mhm.
music for films. So there you go.
Mhm.
Leon,
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. This is my second go around. I shouldn't do this, but I'm just curious, very quickly. Uh, did you think about this talk for a while, or did you coordinate it with the daily word message? Because everything just comes together. Was that kind of a happy accident, a unity moment type thing, or?
Definitely a happy accident. So I thought of this talk last week when I got a message from God, and I had a moment. I was going through a difficult period emotionally at the moment, and I was asking for help. Basically, I was like, I'm struggling. Like, help me out. Like, what do I need to do? And I got some responses, and I was like, dang, like why don't I do this more often? That's where it came from. So it was pretty recent. Didn't really coordinate anything. Just something that kind of happened to me recently that made me think of it.
Say something too.
well,
I want to comment. After Stand By Me, you went on an Art Tatum riff that I thought was creative, and I really appreciate that.
I've been working on my jazz a little bit. In fact, there's a jazz song in my new album, believe it or not.
Good. I loved it.
Yeah, I'm working on that.
yeah, maybe we can work on calling you to our church a little more often too.
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to say something too. Thank you, Ian. I always appreciate you. With being the age that you are, being the age that the rest of us are, I appreciate coming from your perspective, in the world, and how you see the world and how you navigate through the world. And, you tell us that through your talks. And, you say going, it's like practicing the presence of God, helping us to get through the fear, because there's so much fear in the world right now. And this message is so vital and so important for us to find God in everything, in one thing or everything. I seem to find God in a lot of things throughout my lifetime. And it's changed throughout my lifetime too. Like before, look, we had this image of God, and now it's like God is everywhere. And now I think it's fluctuating. It changes, which is wonderful. So yeah, I think your message is really vital at this time in our lives. So I really, really thank you for that.
Well, I'm very glad you enjoyed it.
Patty, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say that something that I it's not a struggle, but I keep going back to uh, seeing Mother Teresa, and I keep hearing in my head her saying that she sees God in the eyes of every human being. So, which means to see anyone and to see the Christ or God in that person, that's the ultimate goal for me. And I think that your talk brought that home, and our conversation and brought that home to me. And that's I may never achieve that goal in my daily life, but it just keeps coming back for me, that to see the Christ in every person's eyes that I see every day, wherever I am. And not only in the creatures, which I adore every creature. I'm afraid of some of them, but I adore them. But maybe I've made my case there. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I think that's a wonderful quote to try to live day to day,
Yes.
and it's a great practice.
Well, at least, Patty, you don't feel these creatures. You've come to know them really well.
I know them really well. That it's okay.
And Zach, I know that you're part of that tribe, the Utes, the all-knowing Utes. Do you have some wisdom to share with us?
I thought that I'd start first with a joke that probably everybody already knows, but I also, in that case, know that it will go over well given its theme. The theme of the little girl in Sunday school. The teacher asked them to all draw pictures of whatever they like. And the little girl says, "I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher said, "Nobody knows what God looks like." And the little girl says, "They will when I finish my picture."
They will when they see my picture.
Oh.
I think that's the most appropriate joke I've heard in a very long time.
But you should come in a little more often. We have a lot of appropriate jokes every week.
They'll know.
Before we sing out, how about some more music? I'm very selfish here. I think I'm being selfish for all of us. We want to hear some more from you, maybe a past album, whatever you're inspired to before, and then go right into our final song. But before you do that, the prayer of protection, the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over all of us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. So I'll leave it up to you to finish up, and it will take us right to the end, and then I'll close the session.
All right. I like this challenge. Play a song that leads right into "Let There Be Peace on Earth." Let's see if I can figure that out. the peace that was meant to be. With God as our Father, united all are we. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be my moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
Thank you so much for your message, your music, your talent. And yes, we've been together here to observe God speaking to all of us this morning. So have a great week, everyone.
Thank you all so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very
Wait a
much.
minute, Neil.
Or as they say, no, thank you.
Wait a minute, Neil.
Love you, Jane. Love you, everyone.
And take care. Great.
Yeah.
Have a great week.
I think it's gone. Where's Ian?
Where's Ian? Gone.
Oh, he's gone.
He gone?